and I mean this hypothetically, you've gone out in a Gt2 Rs, right? And I've said to you, as a friend, you need to make that car a bit faster around the lap. Now, of course, your brain would say, shut up, mate, that's ridiculous. I'm still clearing up the mess from my undercrackers after what that car just did to me. But Manthey, the now mostly Porsche-owned race team that deals with this stuff, well, it's gone and done just that. It's created the Gt2 Rs MR, Manthey-Racing, which is an aero and suspension wheel and tyre package for the Gt2 Rs. It's about 90,000 euros, which sounds ridiculous until you experience it. This is the best car that's based on a normal street car that you could take on a racetrack with number plates that I've driven. I know that's quite a narrow niche, but it is sensational. Because it's like a wild ride, you know? It's not some accurate little racing car. This is a yob, this thing. You know, it wants to slide everywhere. I got 700 horsepower, for God's sake. I can smoke this bad boy wherever I want to, but I can also set lap times as well. What a flipping machine! Now, I do it no justice by just doing great big skids though. So we'll just go a little bit sensible on the straight and we'll talk you through some of it. So suspension, basically a KW system stolen from the GT3R racing car. It's expensive, still has the helper spring. It does that very clever thing that expensive suspension does. It takes all of those light imperfections, the stuff that your eye says, well, that's gonna cause a bit of a bump, and it just irons it out. But then the moment you put load into the car, it supports itself and it stays flat. It's a magic trick. It's so good. I mean, it's miles better than the standard suspension, which in itself is very, very good. There's a new brake pad material to give a bit more bite. That does make a big difference. This thing really does stop. Look at the ride heights as well. The thing is buried into the ground, especially at the back. They've taken some rake out, and that gives the car much better stability on the entry to a turn. You can ad lock, trail it in, always a problem in a 911. Then there's just the way the thing goes. Wow! They've done nothing to the engine apparently. Well, this one feels pretty angry. This is an engineering car. It's done 49,000 kilometers and it feels fit as a fiddle. And this is the actual car that holds the record for a modified street car around the Nürburgring with Lars at the wheel at 6 minutes 40 seconds, which is quite difficult to comprehend really, isn't it? This also has a lot more aero. They fitted a massive gurney to the rear wing, different end plates, it's got a different front splitter, they've managed the underbody, it's got a different diffuser. Big difference. Have a look at the onboard fast lap now, and you can see that I can stay flat in places in this car, well, that you just can't in normal cars, even in hypercars. So the big question is, this amazing tweaked up Gt2 Rs should have the performance to take care of hypercars or stay with them. Let's see what happens. circuit on an outlap on scrub tyres. It's an animal. Wow. Yeah. So 49.5.
That's what we have to look it up a bit. Yeah.
I'll take.
Pretty fast.
Not so far off now. Life in the old dog,
Yeah.
You just have to recalibrate your head because it's happening so fast. And you have also, because it has more aerodynamic than I thought, more aero in the quick stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you're like, I'm wide open through the hole, which you shouldn't be in a car like that. And the whole thing is, as you go to it, like smashed into the ground. Wow. Yeah. So that's 2.5 seconds quicker than I've ever gone around here. In a 918 or a P1 or anything.
That's amazing, huh?
In a Gt2 Rs.
It's just an old 911.
49,000 kilometers, probably 50 now.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things going on here. First of all, the performance of the car around Portimao is staggering. 49.5 or just under 49.45 is the fastest I've been here by a long way, and it's a new lap record for the circuit. But Lars, the guy that developed it, he went even quicker, so he can have the record of 48 something. We'll confirm it in a minute. So fair play to him, and he's young and he's good at this, so I happily defer to the better man. The other thing that needs to be noted is this car is gorgeous. The patina of this car, this is the car that did the Nürburgring lap record. I love the fact that it's got a cup car seat in it. I love the fact that it's got a 911R passenger seat with a houndstooth trim. It's all a bit ratty inside. This should never be changed. If anyone at Porsche, and they've stood there, if anyone changes this car, tries to make it look optically clever, then they're going to hunt you down. Leave it as it is, because it's a piece of history, and it's just utterly gorgeous. The only thing is these Alcantara steering wheels get a bit munged up, you know, they've got too much DNA from other people on them, so it's like. So that's progress. You come here 3 years after you drove a McLaren P1 and set a certain lap time, and you go 2 or 3 seconds quicker in a slightly modified series production Porsche with no hybridity and nothing clever. Well done Michelin, well done KW, well done Porsche, well done Manthey. All right, girls and boys, you've got the keys to the new 911 and 992. When you're a bit of a car geek like me, what do? You go and poke around in it, don't you? Come and poke around. And the first thing that you have to test on a sports car, well, the door handles, of course. I flip the button, the door handle comes out. Put my hand under, open it. This is sacrilege. Is that really a 911? It should have a normal handle. Lock it, goes away. Now, I think it is actually quite a neat solution, but, see, I'm opening it now. Come on. Oh, that's a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? I think it's just, oh, right, there we go. That is quite heavily sprung. I think this is quite controversial. Now, for fear of you all switching off, let's go and drive the thing. Now, as we said, this is an unexpected first early go in the new 992. I'm in a Carrera S. It's bright yellow, it's got some bits and bobs, PDK gearbox. The manual's not available until next year, apparently. And because it's Germany, we can't go out on the road because you need winter tyres, and winter tyres are fairly hopeless. So we're at Hockenheim, which is frankly meaningless for an everyday car like a Carrera S, but it gives us a chance to try the steering, I suppose the ride and the handling on a flat surface, and the engine and the gearbox, obviously. So, first things first, it feels very 911, which is great. I'm sitting low in the seat, I've got the right amount of support around my kidneys, steering wheel is just the right size, and, well, to me, it feels like it's just inherited the last GT3 steering. This complaint over electricity powering your steering, it's gone for me. It doesn't sort of wriggle about and writhe the way that the old air-cooled cars did with their hydraulic steering, but, you know, times have moved on, it's changed. Get over it. What you end up with is a very agile car. It doesn't feel any bigger than the last 991. And I think one overarching point I'll make, this feels like a heavily facelifted 991, not an all-new car. That's what it feels like to me. And I think underneath it probably is. There's more aluminium in it, the construction, but ultimately this is a 991 plus, which means a 992, I suppose. I'm confusing myself now. I love the way the steering loads up during the corner. I really do. I think there's a greater sense of connection there was with the previous car. And this engine, for a turbocharged motor, listen to it. You know, to me it sounds like a normally aspirated flat six from a 996. And the response, I mean, you really are just not aware of the fact that it's turbocharged. Yeah. They really are getting somewhere with this turbocharging, and it's fast too. This doesn't feel an awful lot slower than my GT3 Touring. Sorry, what was my GT3 Touring. Okay, time for some more cabin geeking. I think, before we get into the details of it, they've done a pretty good job here. This feels very 911. You've got classic rev counter ahead of you. It's surrounded by ancillary instruments. The two on the outside are completely obscured by the steering wheel, which is a bit odd, but you end up with 5 clock faces and a screen in the middle here. That feels classically 911 to me. This little gear lever that looks a bit inadequate on the films and the photos I've seen already is far better in real life. The quality is high, and it's pretty common sense in here. There's a bit of stuff that I don't quite understand. There's some separation of the damper button out on the dashboard here, which I don't quite understand. And this cup holder, again, what's going on here? Why have we lost the lovely double cup holder here, which was so practical if you live with a 911? I've now got this. What do you do with that? That's just very odd. The other cup holder is right over here, which I can't really reach. And I use both of them in my 911, certainly. Seat, comfortable, good. Driving position, nice and low. Steering wheel, bang on. Since the 918, Porsche's steering wheel game has been strong. This three-dimensional rev counter is absolutely superb, okay? Because its typefaces and the needle design and that central little point there is 1970s. So a lot of this cabin harks back to the long bonnet cars of the 1970s, and I think they're rather beautiful. As you can see when we switch the ignition on, this is Panamera, Cayenne, Mccann. It's the standard Porsche layout, okay? You either love it or you don't. I think it works very well. It means you get a huge variety of options for the screen. It can show you performance data, it can show you where you're going, where you've been, and you can play around with the chassis and do everything else. I think it makes sense. So, it feels nicely 911 in here to me. Backseat space, pretty good. Never underestimate the back seats of a 911. I use mine the whole time for my little people. It separates the car from just about any other sports car. Glove box, not a bad size. These door bins, I'm being a real 911 geek now. If you look over there, point that one there, look at that one down there. They used to be a sort of hinged bit behind, underneath where your elbow goes. They've now left that just open. I think it's quite a good solution, because I used to spend a lot of time flexing that forwards and backwards. And that bin just ahead of the door handle is crucial. That's where you put everything of any value in a 911. And they've just lined it with a bit more carpet this time. Isn't that interesting? Now, the interior door handle is very interesting. I can't quite believe I just said that, but it is. It's flush with this nice panel here, and it allows your hand to get in there. And when you pull it, it's quite heavily sprung. And what happens is, it really shunts the door away from you. In the 991, when you try and open the door, you have to get your elbow and give it a massive bang to get it to open. But they've worked that out because it's got an extra spring, so you just touch it and the door really flies open. Not too far, just enough. It's been German engineered. I will say one thing though, the first 3 times I did it, I got my little finger caught in there. There could be some very nasty, pinky personal injury claims coming Porsche's way. What do we think then? I think it's a clever blend of next gen and recognisable 911. Porsche is very good at this stuff. There's something so reassuring about the latch still being in the same place. Just there, move to the right, up she pops. I love that. And look, it's a space in between 2 front wheels. That looks about the same size to me. I mean, I could quote something in litres, but it doesn't mean anything, does it? What I can tell you is a couple of bags will go in there, and that will swallow more than you think it should by looking at it. That's all you need to know about the 911's bonnet. Hasn't got its sticker up there. It's worth 20 grand less in the trade already. Bang. Let's have a look down the back here. I warn you, you're about to see something spectacular. The new 911's engine. Watch this. There you go, in all its glory. 2 fans from a gaming PC and a plastic badge that says 3 Gt2 Rs. Is that how far we've come? Isn't that the most disappointing thing? You spend 120 grand on a new car and you've got Not much to show for it. And listen to this. That is the sound of plastic. But overall, from the outside, I think it's a pretty good effort. I'm not the arbiter of what's good and bad looking. Look, you see I've slept in these clothes for about a week. I know nothing about the sartorial side of life, but to me, the wide hips and now the single width body style, so a 4S is the same width as a 2S, is a good looking car. It's got load of hip, load of shoulder, tapers down to the front, it looks aggressive. 4S is the same width as the outgoing 991 4S, so it's not got any wider. And the one thing that doesn't come across in the photographs I've seen so far, this LED strip that goes all the way across the back of the car looks very flat and two-dimensional. But when you see the car in the raw, there's a real taper across the top. The curvature here, as you walk around the car, means it's got a really nice, round arse. The 992 is very much a 911 plus. The motor in this S model gains a particulate filter and some new turbos and ends up with 444 horsepower and 369 foot-pounds of torque. It's a little heavier too, despite more of it being made of aluminium. It's a really fast car. Gearbox, do you know what? I was expecting a little bit more from this PDK transmission. It's very, very smooth and it's very positive, but the shifts in the sport mode, they're a little bit lackluster. I pull the lever and it's nothing like as quick as it is on a GT3. What happens if you back it in a bit, I wonder? Oh. So it's got a locker in there, in this Carrera 2S model. The cabin, the more time I spend in it, the more I like it. It's got rear seats, it looks like a 911, sounds like a 911. I mean, what's not to like, really? Tell you what, whilst you're sort of contemplating that, I'm going to see if I can wreck these new Pirellis they've just fitted to it. Yeah. Is it still a sports car? That's the question that I posed at the beginning. It is very much a sports car, you know. It really is very much a sports car because it's lively and it wants to have fun. It's got personality as well. Yeah. It doesn't bristle the way that the old 911s do, but no cars do anymore. They're too competent. You can't have the competence this has as an everyday car, the comfort, the convenience, the usability, and expect it to be just as thrilling as they used to be. It'll do that all day long. That's enough for me. Comfortable on the motorway and quiet as well. I'm not getting the road noise. I can't tell you anything about the ride though, nothing, because it's so flat here. So we need to get it on a good old bumpy British road and tell you. But first impressions, yeah, as expected. It's not a revolution. It's a really sensible, clever evolution of a 991 with a great new cabin and fantastic engine. I can't really complain. There you go. Oh, wow. Wow. So what's it like to drive? I have to say, I'm completely befuddled because it's so special. So, immediately feels light and agile and much, much pokier than 32 horsepower would ever let you think. I mean, this should be like a 2CV, but it's miles quicker. Raucous noise, no sound editing. I mean, the engine is, I can see the engine from where I'm sitting. I can feel it, I can smell it. Throttle response is great. It feels like a very little, very old little Porsche. Oh, wow. Brakes, yeah, it's got some brakes. They're not necessarily my friend at the moment. Gear linkage is pretty good. Steering with a thin tyre and this lovely thin steering wheel is delicious. Just wriggles about in my hands. Do I look like a happy boy? Oh. I think if you love Porsche, if you love its approach to motor vehicles, you can't fail to be totally captivated by this machine, because the DNA is here. This is the genesis, this is where it began, and it feels like it did as well. There's a lot of conjecture about whether it's a real Porsche or not. Well, the chassis is different enough to a Volkswagen to mean, to me, that it's a Porsche, and its place in the Porsche narrative is absolutely beyond reproach, isn't it? There'll be those that say it's not a real Porsche, that a Brie Gummund Austrian-built 356 is the first true Porsche, but this is where it began. This is where the thinking began. And you can't underestimate that, because the beginning of a car company is arguably where it started in the head of the founder, surely. Good Lord, I would love to do a long journey in this. It feels sprightly, you know. It feels like it wants to get up and go, it wants to be moving. Lack of mass is gorgeous. No real sense of the weight distribution either, because the engine is so small and light, to be balanced out by a tank of fuel anyway. Oh, take me home. If I had the money, it would have to be in the shed, and whoever didn't let it into the Mille blimey, just nibbles away at the surface, and it feels so on its toes. If it wasn't worth north of 10 million quid, I'd try and skid it about, but that would be rude.
But before this film ends, just sit back and look at some more amazing details of this piece of history. So what is a 919? Well, it's a mid-engined endurance racer designed to win Le Mans, which it did a few times. It is the most complex car I've ever seen, using a turbocharged 2-litre V4 internal combustion engine powering the rear wheels with around 500 horsepower, and a single electric motor for the front wheels with another 500 horsepower too. That's around 1,000 horsepower in this configuration, 4-wheel drive, massive downforce, and less than 900 kilograms. It will marmalise anything less than a Formula 1 car, and is reliable enough to do so for 24 hours, and probably more. It's a very, very special and complicated machine, and is tended to by a vast team of people. First up, some familiarisation laps on wet tyres and a slightly damp track.
Okay, so this is the 919. First of all, it feels intimidating sitting down here. I'm on wet tyres because the weather's not been brilliant. It's the most complicated racing car ever made, I think. Paul's letting us drive it here in Aragon. Wow. So, what's it like? Well, immediately the controls feel easy, nothing too intimidating about them. Not much feel through the brake pedal. I'll try and go a bit quicker. A bit damp here in places. Whoa! And immediately it's up to VMAX. Bit of vibration so I can't see too much. Doing 185 miles an hour without the car even thinking about it. And the back straight feels like it goes on forever. What's it like into this big turn at the bottom? I gather it's a bit quick. And then just feel the downforce. Wow. Oh, the boost out the corners with the hybrid, the electricity is savage. Whoa. And then it just goes. Fantastic thing. All the complication, it feels quite simple to drive. Don't be too aggressive on the way in, don't get on the throttle too early. That initial boost, but it's just bloody addictive. Because the car feels a bit different in every corner. There's a sense that it's doing stuff I don't know about. Oh, it's more like a bloody spaceship in a car. What a thing. The traction it develops, and the speed it wants to carry through the corners. I'm not even scratching the surface here. I can't believe it's doing this on a wet tyre. Engine, differentials, it's just so much going on. Feel the bloody G-forces there. What a bloody machine. Yeah, this is the spiritual successor to the 917. Utterly dominant. Engineering deployed to crush a racing circuit.
Normally aspirated, a lightweight philosophy, manual transmission, left-hand drive only, and built for people who love driving. Yes, it's the 1991 Peugeot 205 Rally.
Now you're probably thinking, has he completely taken leave of his senses by comparing a 1.3 litre Peugeot 205 to arguably the finest Porsche 911 ever built? Well, I haven't. The way I see it, driving is really about what your feet do, what your bottom feels, and what your arms do. And taken that way, driving broken down into that binary view, this little 205 is one of the best cars I've ever driven, and it embodies a lightweight philosophy with 3 pedals and a stick, which to me is exactly what the 911R does. So I'm going to compare them anyway, and right now I wouldn't want to be in any other car, including the 911R, and I'll tell you why. Now those of you of a certain age will understand what this car is about, but you youngsters, allow me to educate you. Back in the late 80s, Peugeot wanted to homologate the 205 to go rallying in France in the lesser classes. So they built a certain number of these sub 1300cc 205s. They used some parts bin specials, so they used some bits from the 1.6 GTI, the 1.9. This is a GTI suspension car with 100 horsepower from a 1294cc engine with twin Webers on it and eminently tunable. I bought this one quite recently and it had no service history. I didn't quite know what I was buying, but now I've got it back here, I can be fairly certain it has more than 100 and whatever it's supposed to have, 105 bhp, 103 horsepower. This feels like it's got a load more, because I don't think a 205 GTI 1.6 would see where this had gone. It's that much faster. But fundamentally, this is a rally on sticky tyres, and it just feels so alive. And it's not just about how it revs out. I'm talking about the steering, the pedal feel, the gearbox. I mean, for me, just driving slowly, this gearbox is the sweetest gearbox of any car ever made. And I include the 911R in that. Now this thing is supposed to have 105 horsepower, and it's supposed to weigh about 790 kilograms. Well, I've got Neil next to me, so it's a bit heavier than that at the moment, but this one feels a bit lighter, it's grippier, and I think it has more than 105 horsepower, because it's a right little rocket sled. It has one of the best gear changes of any car ever made. It's short, it's precise, the pedal box is just superb. The grip, it's on Toyo 888s, you just throw it in, and it goes. And you wring its neck, and it reminds you why you always love driving. You remember what it was like as a kid? The unassisted steering is light, just off centre, but as it loads up and as you put more and more load in, your arms begin to think, oh, I'm hanging on to that, I'm hanging on to that, and then you see the veins coming out in your forearms. What a car. Look at that A-pillar there. You'd be better off being a pedestrian in a crash than sitting inside this thing. Under 800 kilograms. I mean, Lotus is currently boasting about having made an Elise that's heavier than this car. And this is a hatchback. And on this road here today, you can have as much fun in this thing as you can any car built. And it was what? £13,000, which is a lot for a very old French hatchback. But in the context of how good it is to drive, total bargain. Now, I know it's very easy for people in my position to say things like, it stacks up against the very latest manual super duper Porsche. But the only way to try that out, to test that theory, to see whether I'm talking absolute bobbins, is to, drive the latest, greatest 911 with a manual gearbox. I mean, can you really step from a 100 horsepower Peugeot built in 1991 into the latest, greatest 911 and have a comparable driving experience? Or does the 911 just make this thing feel utterly ridiculous? I don't know, I suppose you have to do it to find out. Here we go then, some 911. What does it feel like when you jump from that Peugeot straight into the greatest 911 of all? Odd. This car feels huge, it feels heavy, it feels big, and it feels quite soft initially as well, because that Peugeot is very stiff. It also feels very, very fast after the Peugeot. In second gear, this thing is rabidly fast. It's so fast that every time you go full bore in second gear, mentally, you have to move your hand towards the gear lever, because as you accelerate, you'll need third. It's a bit like a bike in that respect. You're there waiting for the gear. And I suppose for those that want to go quickly, that's the reason for having a paddle shift car. But for those of us that love driving, that's part of the excitement. You spend quite a lot of time driving with one hand on the wheel, so I come out this turn now on one hand on the wheel so I can grab third on the way out. So it's good for the old upper body. And what I will say is that everything's happening at such a low speed in the Peugeot compared to this thing. I love this car, but if you give it full bean second, third, get up into fourth, you're going quite quickly. Whereas in the Peugeot, you really aren't. The shift quality, it's slicker than the Peugeot's, but it's less mechanical. The steering in this car is great for a modern assisted electric rack, but compared to that unassisted rack in the Peugeot, there's no great sense of weight building up and of grip level through the front axle the way that Peugeot is. That's telepathic compared to this thing. But then there's the rear driven aspect, and of course the engine in this car is just amazing. The shift quality, it's really good. It's better than the 997 generation GT cars that I felt were a little bit notchy. This is much slicker, but the Peugeot's lever is entirely mechanical. You can feel synchromesh speeding things up. You can feel gears being accepted and rejected sometimes. Here, this isn't quite as direct. It's still great. The steering, I mean, it's a great rack for an electric assisted rack, but it's nothing compared to that unassisted steering in the Peugeot, which really does give you a sense of what's going on underneath you. This is accurate, but still numb in comparison. And the engine, the engine in this car is one of the best engines I've ever used. The Peugeots, Purchase is just a fun 4-cylinder. This is as good as it gets. But what's really interesting is that up and down this road, the Peugeot as a driving device holds its own. It's not as fast, it's nothing like as capable, but it gets you a bit sweaty and it involves you in the process, and it's only as good as your inputs. And I think the 911R deserves credit for that, because it's taken the zeitgeist away from paddles and lap times and all that other bobbins, and it's just said, off you go, on your own. And if you want to, you can switch it all off. This is unquestionably one of the best cars I've driven in the last 5 years. But if you break driving down to the very basics, to what your feet do, what your hands do, how your body reacts, how you feel about the process, that little Peugeot, while it runs it quite close, that's ridiculous.